We met as a team and we talked about exactly how we wanted this to go and how we were gonna flip, what we were talking about. Values comes up for Pete and I all the time when we meet with people that want us to graze with them. There have been people that we have turned down because our values do not align. And we're gonna talk a little bit more of that on the panel, and I would guarantee that if you ask Roger and Betsy what their values are, they're gonna know them. And so it's really important. And also when we met as a team and we talked about who we wanted on this panel, it is because of Roger and Betsy that Pete and I do what we do. Pete had the courage to call Roger and they talked on the phone for almost 3 hours. And we have been, well, in my opinion, I don't know what they'll say, but hard, solid friends since then. So we've got some questions, common questions that come up every time someone would like us to lease or come graze their property. And so we've come up with some questions, but if you have different questions, Michael Lee is just gonna kick us off and ask us a few to get us warmed up. But if there's something burning that you wanna know, by all means, shout it out.
Do you want me to spread?
Sure. I love extensions, just want talking.
So, will she draw like you would draw?
That's right, we usually draw cartoons, but no, she probably way more professional.
In your packets, there is a list of common questions in there. There is space for you to take notes during the panel if you want to. And there are some very generic answers under there. Those are not right answers by any means, but I think they're just some starting off points. I'm gonna go maybe 3 questions and then just take questions from the audience.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah, we feel like we need to answer this. I feel like we've been talking about this pretty well. So this is, what are the benefits of leasing land for regenerative grazing compared to other land management options? You all feel like you know the answer to this?
No, because you haven't explained what regenerative grazing is.
Okay, great.
So we will give our definition of regenerative management. So go ahead, Roger and Betsy, you're gonna go first.
That's the good question, is what it defined in that specifically. Really, it all applies in the face of, by trying to zero in on a definition for regenerative, really hampers, you don't want those kind of boundaries around your management. You need to be able to, I would call it more adaptive land management. But everybody seems to need a buzzword. So regenerative seems to be it, so we copy it.
The picture of the clock,
Betsy's like, I got this.
the picture of the clock made it show as if compared to the other types of grazing that you were simply doing less grazing.
No.
And
So-
be short duration, more impactful, like larger numbers of cattle for a short period of time, which will increase the rest of recovery time of what we would have already faced. That would be a principle of regenerative, but to me, it's more like working in sync with natural systems. And I mean, because the word sustainability, another buzzword is sustain, but to me, regenerative is making things better, like going back to how things used to be, when we're talking about the buffalo when they grazed, and you're going back to the way natural systems rebuild in soil, which rebuilds nutrition in plants, which helps people and ultimately their health as well as the animals' health, and we consume them and plants, and so just ultimately helping raise the whole everything.
And I would add on to that and also tag on to Roger's adaptive management. That's really what we really love that term. Because there are times where we don't start in the same place every year, but we definitely don't move in the same direction. We will give a lot of rest to places. Sometimes it's 2 years, depending on what that land needs and what we're looking at. And what that means is, if there's a lot of thatch and we want to use the cows to break that down, we'll move them into that place and use those cows as a tool to regenerate that land. And so the name of the game is rest and regenerating. It's more of an action. Yeah.
So it's like rotational grazing, but you're being more aware of if a specific area needs more or less work.
Yep, it's adaptive grazing. Yep. And rotational And again, it's a term, because we've
Right.
all shifted in this industry, rotational, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, classic savory system. That's really where that started, which was great. It got us thinking differently. But this adaptive is, we might start at 1, and we're gonna go clear down to 44 if we've got it all numbered like that, and hit that, and then we're gonna shoot up to 15. But it is informed by what the land needs and what the land is looking for. That determines our decisions.
Or water resources. things
That's
like
another
that.
one.
Yeah.
All right, nailed it.
Good job.
Sweating.
Well, everybody uses it, and it's like,
Sure.
Yeah.
really?
Yeah,
Thank you, Art.
Yeah.
You did mention shorter duration. What does that look like? Is that also adaptive? Can it be like a month, a week, 2 days? Is it what, yeah, how do you know what's short?
It depends a lot on the time of the year, like if it's the growing season, you might want it shorter then. You know, in the growing season, correct me if I'm wrong, guys, because I couldn't be, but, you know, plants will start regrowing within about 7 days, and the definition of overgrazing is if those plants are bitten off again when, you know, when they start to regrow, and so that will affect their lifespan, and it's not good for them. So if you can move on before those plants start to regrow, that's beneficial. And depending on the time of year, this time of year, they might be regrowing right now because we've had moisture and nice weather, but typically this time of the year, they're not really growing back. I was concerned about the length of time. I'm sure you guys can add more to that. Oh, sounds- you know what you're talking about.
Every thing I would say, sometimes there's a lot of land around that actually needs an intentional overgrazing event. Now, so you need to cause a disruption of some sort, and to reset. For instance, if you have a field of nothing but smooth ground, you probably do want to overgraze smooth ground. And hopefully, your timing can be right, so you can cause a setback or a stress to that plant. Then maybe you need to stay out of it for 2 years or whatever, or a year and a half or whatever, but trying to give opportunity to other species.
We talked about seed, I don't know how that can be beneficial, but there is a latent seed back there in the ground, and if you provide the right conditions, they will come back.
So how do you know if the people who are grazing your land are doing the right thing on your land? That's something that I would be really concerned about. How would you answer that question for people that are asking that?
I think that takes you a little bit away from the actual grazing. And you need to know the people that you're dealing with, and you need to ask for references. And you need to have trust as well, but you have to evaluate all those things. And maybe have a third party verify that you're working with the right people, whether, and that's from both. I think that is something that both the landowner and the grazer should consider all points.
Do you all give references if you were looking for land to lease? Is that something you would go find? You two, Meagan, is that something you do? Y'all probably don't, y'all probably don't.
No, I'm trying to think, have we given people like maybe yes or no? We've been lucky just in terms of word of mouth. We had a real estate agent. I guess we could consider that a reference. Went to the landowner that she had just sold this property to, and they were very interested in conservation, and she knew that we were too, and so she played that role. But that's really where we'll really use our values to come in on that, and we have a long conversation. We do our leases pretty outside the box compared to just what's considered normal around here. That's really where, again, we are able to align with those values and create a lease together that we're both happy. But the rancher isn't overpaying. It's expensive. It's expensive to ranch. And I think that when you're running your ranch like a business, you get really creative with those leases, and that we're doing your land a favor. We've got 100 landscapers. We're gonna bring them on for X amount of days and then they're gone. We're not just gonna drop them off and leave. And so I think that's where that trust comes in, and then also education and working together, and again, just that values alignment, I think is pretty good.
Sorry, you represent the cows. Is that right?
Represent what's that?
The cows.
Yeah, Barney Creek Livestock, yeah,
Okay, so
Yep.
you're going to other people's property to graze.
yes.
And when you do that, you're actively doing that, you don't just drop the kids off at kindergarten.
Correct, we do that,
You're
yeah.
there all the time and you're moving the supplement, and you're moving the whatever.
Yeah, we move them, we come once a day or every couple days and move them, we set new fences. We
Great, get your phone number.
Okay, we use everything, just electric and solar, and move them depending on where we're at. That's where that context that Betsy was talking about in the time of season will depend on how much they move, but we're very clear about that. We have one team member, is what we like to refer to them as. She always wants the cows there on her birthday. We do our best. And then sometimes it's a phone call and we apologize, but yeah, that's where we really come back to.
I'd just like to go back to the question, I think the key word there is the right thing. I mean, what does the word right mean? It depends what the goals of the landowner are, and if they want to enjoy the land or what their events, they might have a wedding plan. There's just lots of context, things that you need to work around, and but yeah, to match up, you just need to understand what their goals are with their property. They bought it, they obviously want to enjoy it, and they don't want cows in their yard.
Yeah,
Or they have guests or whatever, there's a lot of considerations and.
Yeah.
But, yeah, like I think there's lots of creative ways to do leases to achieve both those goals.
No, can't touch anything. Okay. How do you monitor and measure the health of land during and after grazing?
Sometimes the effects of these regenerative practices take, and sometimes things are visible right away, but sometimes they take years to show up, as Alan Williams calls it, cascading and compounding and cascading effects. So there's things that anecdotally you might see or know that you're doing the right things, but you might not see those results for a while. You might see more bird species the next year, or more plant diversity within the first year or two, but a lot of those things take a while. And you can do monitoring as well, or you might just see that you don't have as much water running off when it rains, but it's going in the ground instead of running off, and things like that.
yeah. What do you think, Roger?
I agree, all of the above. You can monitor, you can actually do infiltration tests, you could soil biological tests, there's lots of scientific ways, but there's also the longer term things we've been talking about, whether it's bird habitat, pollinator habitat, and bird counts, or all sorts of wildlife presence that you may or may not notice. So I think there's just a huge amount of things that can be monitored, and some of it's a little bit observational. I don't know, are you seeing good things? Because one person's idea of a good thing might not be the other person. You may not have agreement with, or may even be counter to the science. You may want to see, somebody may have an objective that doesn't really line up with, and that's okay. To a degree, in certain places, you need to meet those goals.
I would agree with all of that, and what we really try to do too is when we meet with the landowner, we really talk about the things they might see. We try to bring them up to what we're doing so that the cows are the hero. And what they might see, again, that bird species, they might see a lot more spiders, which learning tonight might be pretty indicative of that, which I'm gonna check out when I go home. But also that's bringing in the birds, and then also we'll have a lot of people comment on a lot more upland game birds they've seen since the cows have come through, and more fox and more wildlife. And again, that just went back to that values and what they wanted, so that's what we make sure we're leaving those different heights of grasses that Christian talked about too, for birds, that's one of their, what they want. Yeah.
So on the spiders, so you don't get rid of spiders, you just shift from lycosis to nyphosis, different type of spider. But then back to monitoring, so what I do a lot of soils and monitoring. So soil Corey's Jackie, or she, you have a soil probe?
Have
Yeah,
three.
you can borrow that. And, or you can, they cost $120 online, you can buy one, and then you don't have to spend the gas to drive in town to get it from Jackie, and then you drop it back off. And you can look at things like NP and K, nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium, some of the sulfur, some of the micronutrients, and track those with time. Some of them are very mobile in soil, some of them are not mobile at all in soils. But really one of the benchmarks that I've picked up on in regenerative agriculture is the organic matter. The organic matter holds all the NP and K. It changes what's called cation exchange capacity in the soil, so it holds on to nutrients better in the soil, so it leach out. Nitrogen is very prone to leaching. Cation exchange capacity actually helps to hold on certain forms of nitrogen. There's ammonia, which is a positively charged, nitrate, which is a negatively charged. It helps to hold on to the forms of that in the soil. Long story short, I won't take another 20 minutes to explain that. But long story short is that it goes back to what you were saying about things don't happen for a long time. In Montana, 6% organic matter is super low. So you can see where it feels that organic matter wise by taking soil cores. You can send the kids out on a 4-wheeler, they can punch the holes. You send them off, cost $30 per field. You can do a deposit in there. I have things written up on that. Get a hold of me. I will email you to the point you block me. But you can take that and look at organic matter. Just if you just want to use that as a proxy, that's pretty good. And start off. So where's your field at? Is this in organic matter tracks precip? So if it's in this, maybe this is irrigated wheel line, or maybe it's under a pivot. You're gonna build organic matter a lot faster in a system like this than you will in where I was talking about the native rangelands that are 12, 13 inches of annual precip a year, but still doable. In a good scenario, 1% a decade is what you can expect. In a dry land, rangeland scenario in Montana, 0.5% a decade. So if you're starting off with soils that are 1.5%, you've got a lot of room for improvement, but you might want to get your kids to buy into it too, because it's going to take some time to get there.
That's a succession plan.
Yeah.
Jackie's on
Yeah.
it.
But if you're bumping around 4.5%, or even 4%, depending on where you're at, or higher, probably what you're going to get. So that, in a lot of ways, is an adaptive grazing to me when we think about it, rather than regenerative. You can regenerate land, low soil benefits, change that up, but with lands that are already peaking around. A lot of ag lands are actually really well managed. So now it becomes, that's what I look at as sustainable where it comes down. We're going to sustain it. Okay, we got it where we want it, now we're going to sustain it and keep it there. Or is it something below where we think we can get it in the time with some adaptive grazing management program?
I think the other thing would be worth adding is, it's a baseline. But I think the initial monitoring needs to be a starting point. And that's.
pH is huge in terms of past history use and the ability for legumes to inoculate. And there's the whole things you can go through on that. But yeah, get a baseline of these fields, find out if they're where you like them. Don't put the money into regen in a field that's already where you like it.
Yeah,
Put the money into sustaining that, and put the money into fields that are below where they should be,
yeah,
and build those.
I'd just like to make a plug also, like you can do a lot of stuff on your own. Everybody carries a cell phone. You can go and take a photo of something every year at the same time. And you can look at some just ecological, checklists, right? For the Buzz on the Range project, we used a really simple checklist that we go through, and it changes the way that you look at things, and what gets measured or what's looked at gets managed, right? And it's a lot of fun. You really change your lens. Even because the soil sampling stuff is really great, but sometimes that's just a little intimidating and just go out into the field one day and take some pictures and take a look at some things with a checklist. It's really useful.
Can I add one more thing to a piece of information? I have one farmer who comes to me annually. It's almost like they're writing a Christmas card, but it's a yearly progress report on what has changed in the last year that they've been managing the landscape. And I love that idea as far as monitoring and just creating that personal connection, especially growing number of landowners who don't live here. Just one point there, and they're still renting that piece of land, and I love that whole idea.
Yeah, that's cool. That's like a report card. Definitely doing some transects on different types of the land. We can monitor in 3 to 5 years or something, and then you have the baseline and then go back and see what's changed.
I agree with Michael, walking. View is great, but
Yeah.
if you walk, what's there?
You hear things.
You know, where the weeds are, you know, that they're not there the next year, or they are.
Yeah, let's talk about weeds.
One thing,
You wanna talk about weeds?
not really, but I would add. I think the owner of the livestock, or the person that is managing the livestock, is actually monitoring on multiple times a day, because unhappy livestock are an indication that something's wrong in the system. And so that's an ongoing, constant monitoring system, in a way.
Yeah,
That's really, to be keyed into that is pretty important.
yeah, for sure.
Do you wanna talk about weeds, or do you wanna go to something different?
No, no.
It's like rocket shot me down. Yeah, who's got questions about weeds? Anybody? Oh my gosh, I can't.
One thing we're involved with a ranch this summer that I helped them, and a friend of ours brought goats in and grazed the leafy spurge. And went over it twice, and a pretty big landscape, I think at 400 goats. Jeff is there too, so. I think that is a really positive thing. They really don't want to spray any weeds. Just their core values, it's one of those. So with the goats, they were able to graze in small, high intensity, short duration grazing and move them around, and then they came back again when the reeds started to regrow. And I think maybe we won't know right away how that's doing, but it appears like it worked really well this year. So that's something that I think a bigger scale could really have a great impact.
And I think that speaks to how you're managing your grazing, and Betsy and Roger mentioned it earlier about more cows in smaller areas. They're going to eat those. We have a lot of tansy, a lot of any kind of thistle you can imagine. But when we move our cows, they have to eat that. That's the law. And now they know that's their job, and they will strip all that. And working with some landowners, convincing them that they don't have to go out there and hand pick that. If we can get there and hit it at the right time, they are not going to have to do that. It will take a little bit more time, but we've reduced some thistle on one property like significantly. It was like a field of purple. Great for the bees. But yeah, so yeah, that's right. So I think that, again, that's using those cows, and if you pick a grazer, knowing some of these management tools that they can use those cows as a tool, and they know when that's happening and when to move those cows. And partnering up with other livestock people is brilliant. Because you don't want to run goats, do you?
Not when other people are really good at it. It's also the goats, they're paying to have the goats there to graze, but compared to the chemical costs, it's. Oh, I don't know, I guess.
It's in the ballpark.
It's in the
still more
ballpark,
expensive.
but it's, yeah, I guess it's the greater good, and it's sustaining other people along.
Not killing the soil either.
I think it's a good segue into what animals could be considered. That was a question that a lot of y'all had on this.
We graze somewhere as small as 40 acres because it is on the way to a bigger piece. And so what we're trying to do is convince everybody in that neighborhood, and Will's like, because I've been talking about this for years, to get everybody on board in that neighborhood so we can just move the cows up through all the way up to the mountain. So far, we still have that one place, but sometimes for us, we do have people ask, but it really comes down to how we're going to get them from A to B. It comes down to fencing, and it comes down to water for us.
Then you graze, sheep as well?
Yes, our daughter grazes sheep. She has grazed the one smaller piece, but it took her a while because she only had 15 sheep. So it took her, I don't think she made it all the way around all summer. And then it was a fencing issue. So she really learned her lesson. But yeah, sometimes those smaller pieces are great. for that.
When you have a lot of smaller pieces, if you can go trail them from A to B easily, that's one thing. That if you have to haul them, then you're looking at bringing in panels, or if there's not infrastructure there. So a lot of times we have the portable panels, so you can take those to wherever the cattle are, rather than having to see if there's cow candy or something, so we can create our own infrastructure and then take it. But the water, that's another issue of when that kind of needs to be there, and so that's a conversation to be had, whether you need development or there's, things there that you can improve on or something. But the goats, what other species?
Chickens.
Chickens, yeah.
chickens, yeah.
Small, small areas, chickens can do a lot, I'm
Yeah.
sure geese and ducks, there's a lot of opportunity.
Maybe pigs too, if it was the right scenario, possibly.
We've used pigs to till up what we need to till up a certain drop that was really rough. And so the kids moved those pigs every day. And they just drug the fencing. Oh, they still talk about it, but it worked. We didn't have to.
I think, can we open it up to people's questions?
Yes, please. Yeah.
That'd be good. Do you guys have questions that you want you guys to answer, or just in kind of in general questions?
I have another. I'm sorry to rewind back to weeds again. I know it's a tricky topic. I've had conversations with several landowners who are concerned that livestock would actually spread or introduce weeds to their property through excrement or cattle all the time that have hound's tongue stickers all over. So how do you address that conversation with the landowner?
Go ahead, Roger.
I think there is a risk to some degree, especially if their land is really clean. And burdock would be one, hound dog would be another, certainly, the only way you could do that would be to run the cattle through a chute and make sure they're clean. And then do it, you could leave set for 24 or 36 hours someplace, make sure that seed had been full. And that would be a case of, a livestock owner is probably not gonna very willingly do those things without some sort of surcharge to do that. So then,
Or rate reduction.
or rate reduction.
Yeah, compensation.
Yeah, so at that point, that would be part of the negotiation, making sure that people, but along those lines and with the water as well, the flexibility of when you use land or don't use land is imperative, because water can just go away. And understanding that it's really not a recipe. It's really difficult to keep it very much the recipe. It needs to be. There's always something. Good plan is important, but it's not always changed.
We have a piece, we have a piece where they bring back hound's tongue like you would believe. But what's interesting is when we bring them back to our home lease, we still get some hound's tongue. But I think, and if Nicole Masters was on the call, she could probably answer this. But I think because of our home lease, that place is like what Hayes was referring to, it's just cooking with gas. Everything is just right on. We do have water, which is what Roger was referring to. And what we've been really, I haven't seen they bring it back, but I haven't seen it just spread. So I think that there's no recipe. We're gonna use those animals as a tool. Let's graze it when it's green. Sometimes they'll eat it, or let's work with a goat person. Let's bring the goats in first. They'll eat hound's tongue when it's green, and let's see how we can manage it. This particular place I'm talking about, they took like that high-powered vinegar and went crazy on it. And then we brought the cows in. So I think there's some negotiation and some, let's make a plan and tactics. How can we reduce it? And it's gonna take longer, but I think it's totally possible to reduce it. And then you just start not to notice the weeds. That's our other magical. We don't manage for weeds. Yeah.
And if they eat it, it's still a weed, but if they eat it, then that's okay.
It's forage.
It's forage.
A weed is just a plant.
Right, yeah.
Still saying, yeah, it depends on your goal, what you want.
And then there's the book that Nicole refers to, When Weeds Talk, and
Yeah.
they're an indicator of something underground that's not balanced, or it's trying to do a job. So if you can do grazing and
heal the land, so you do it out of your job, basically, because it's what you're short of or long or whatever.
So when we do a soil test and then we do a plant tissue test, we'll tissue test that weed to see exactly what Betsy's saying, what mineral or what is it pulling? And then how can we counteract that, beat it its own game?
I would have said that you might think in the list there, when you're giving a interview to someone to bring the cows onto your land, you might want to go and look at their place where the cows are coming from to see if they're covered with weeds or not. Are you the first person after winter, so they've been all penned up, or whatever the situation was, you get a better idea if they're gonna bring weeds to you, if you know where they've been grazing before. But I think the wildlife bring equal amount of weeds as cows do. You just look, it's like everywhere they sleep, it's a little bed, and there they all are.
One other question. Yeah.
When you're coming to the table with your cows, and how do you determine your lease rates? Are you calling up owners around you? Are you adjusting this to the cost of land? Grazing in Paradise Valley is gonna be very different than in Cross County, price per acre. And then on top of that, how do you consider your contracts once you do come to an agreement on price per AUM per se?
We do a whole mixed bag, and it depends completely on wherever the lines intersect in the goal of the landowner versus what our objectives are. And so it's very wide range. And it really just depends on the value from our perspective. The value that the livestock are receiving out of that versus the value that the landowner is receiving. And then who's doing what? Because there's so many things that you could have somebody who wanted enough attention that they actually didn't pay you. And then you have a choice. Do you really want to go to that effort? Or does that align with your business strategy? So it's every individual place is completely different. The real basic idea, there are AUM rates and stuff, but they're just a starting point, and then you can subtract and add either direction from that. The one anomaly that we've used is really good winter forage. Winter forage, there are native ranges that have enough boards and enough stuff that cattle do very well throughout the winter, which only would need to be supplemented during a major storm event. And that comparison could be, what's the cost of feeding them? So your best time to use it may be in the middle of the winter. If you're in a lower area, where that's where you might be able to pay the most, because the livestock owner's cost alternative is feeding bale. And so that's a competitive advantage if you can win it really.
And estimating how much forage is available, I really don't think, in my opinion, it would reflect the land values, because the cows need this to eat, and they don't care if they can see the crazies or not. So I don't really think it would be on the same scale as the land values, especially in our area here. But what production is there, and how much you want to take and how much you want to leave, and maybe based on a typical AUM rate, but what services they might provide, or what you're going to do, and just as a starting point. But yeah, just totally back to what their goals are too.
All right, I'm gonna pause this here because we have 5 minutes left till 8.
Yeah.
We want Holly to chime in and talk about how to find.
Let's have Holly explain the unicorn that Anne was hoping for. And if there are more questions on the leases and how to break from tradition and how to get creative about that, like Betsy and Roger were talking about, I am more than willing to talk to you about that, because here's my theory. If people are paying goats to graze somewhere, cows are cute too, and they should be paying people with cows to graze their property. I have shouted that from the mountaintop since we first started this, and I'm a firm believer in that. And we've been able to graze, just like these guys, 365 days a year. And supplement with hay. It's a very different conversation than what we've seen in the past. So I'm, again, more than willing, if you wanna jump on the phone or something.